Alright, hello, my name is Paul Westman, and I'm here to give you another series setting breakdown. This week I'm going to be talking about the Elemental Assassin series as authored by Jennnifer Estep. Alright. Here's the cover. First book is called Spider's Bite. Right, the genre of this series is, like most of the series I've done, an urban fantasy, which is basically fantasy elements set in a modern time in the cities. Series length is 19 books, and there's an additional 9 side stories and novels that are on there. The series is finished, but the author has stated that she is willing to go back and explore other character stories within the series. Alright. Now, for the setting itself, it is in the modern time. And as for the location, this series is set in a city called Ashland for the most part. And what Ashland is a fictional city that is located near the intersection of where Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia meet. So it is set in America in a modern time, but it is still a fictional location. Now let's get into some of the supernatural races that are in the series. There's only 4 that are actually brought in, and they're all considered like subsets of humans, so there's no monsters or anything like that. 4 are the elementals, who are the basic magic users of the series. Next we have vampires. Vampires in the series are typically born and not made, so they are their own separate race, but they do drink blood, and they are considered stronger and faster than normal humans. However, one distinction they have in this series is that they gain additional benefits when they drink supernatural blood. For instance, if they drink the blood of elementals, they can then cast that elemental magic. Next, we have giants. Giants are the most physically imposing and the largest and physically strongest of the species. While they're not necessarily known for their intelligence, the book treats them just like every other group, where some are smart, some not necessarily as smart. Next, we have the dwarves. Dwarves are similar to giants in that they are much stronger and tougher than the other supernatural races, but they're also shorter, and while they are not as strong as giants, typically speaking, they are very close, and the closest out of all the other races. Now, one thing that is in this series is there's each of these species are not like separate species unto their own. There are hybrids of all kinds. Like there are giants that are mixed with dwarves. There is also like dwarven elementals. So it's not just one thing and one thing only. Alright, now let's talk a little bit about the elemental magic of the series. There are 4 basic elements that are used in the elemental magic. It is sort of a hybrid of a hard and soft magic system. It's a hard magic system in that there's limits as to how much the magic can do. The magic is very definitively categorized by the type of magic. However, It's more of a soft magic system in that there's no spells or of sorts. Basically, all the magic is using your will upon the elements or creating the elements directly using the magic and projecting it. Now, all elemental magic is projected through the user's hands, so that's another limitation, and we'll get more into how that's relevant later. But let's go to the specific types. First, there's the primary types of elemental magic. These are the 4 basic elements that are used, and it is stated that the people who are considered true elementals are people who have affinities for at least one of these types of magic. The types of magics are ice and fire, and then stone, and there's also air. Now with stone and air, there's sort of a side type of magic that a side effect to be used. For instance, stone elementals, they can feel emotions and like strong imprints of things that happened in the past with the stone. So it's a limited form of psychometry. So that would allow the elemental to be able to determine if like certain stone or gems was worn by somebody who was generally a good person, or if they tortured a lot of people in the past. And opposite of the stone is the air element, and just like with the stone, there's a limited degree of psychometry to see the past of what the stone was doing. With the air, it does provide some limited precognition. So basically, it's described as like hearing the future on the winds. Another benefit of, or another side magic that air elementals use is they're also able to use their magic for healing, which is not something that the other elemental magics are demonstrated as being able to do. Now, since you have the primary, you also have secondary elemental magics. Like I said before, these aren't necessarily considered like the same as the primary, but they can be just as powerful. First you have water, then there's acid, then you have metal and lightning. So these are the only types of magic that are actually demonstrated throughout the whole series. If you have, you are capable of wielding more than one elemental magic, even though it is biologically based, not a type of magic that you can learn. So, for instance, if you were born with ice magic, you can't just learn any form of air magic. It's just what you're born with is what you can do. Now, you can wield more than one, like I said, but a limitation on that is you cannot wield 2 opposing sets of magic. So, for instance, if your mother had ice magic and your father had fire magic, you would only get one or the other. Whereas if you had ice magic and another parent had air magic, you could potentially wield them both. So, now we're going on to some more of the magic accessories. That's primarily the main thing that is used is silverstone. Now, silverstone is a type of metal that is capable of absorbing magic, and one thing that allows you to do is, since it doesn't really get rid of the magic, it just absorbs it. It can be used to store magic for later. Now, a very important thing to note is that it acts more like a magnet to magic, in that uh, you can't just like choose to avoid storing the magic. It will automatically pull the magic into it. So what that has led to is handcuffs made out of silverstone can be used to block any use of magic. Because, like I said earlier, all magic is projected through the elemental's hands. And since the magic has to go past the silverstone, and the silverstone will automatically absorb it, that prevents elementals from being able to use their magic. Another key part of the series that is often mentioned are runes. Now, technically, runes aren't magical accessories in this series because they have no innate magic of themselves. However, they're often used as like signatures or business models, identifiers. They are oftentimes proprietary. So, for instance, someone might use a sunburst rune, and they would use that to identify themselves and or basically that family. And so runes are also oftentimes made out of silverstone, so that can be used as a storage of magic itself. So, all right, in this series, the political groups aren't as apparent in many cases because a lot of what happens is not political. This is a series about an assassin, and she tends to avoid politics. However, there are certain factions and divisions that can be brought out. There is a prominent police faction. Now, in this series, corruption in the government is basically at its peak. It goes uncontested. So oftentimes the police are nowhere near as effective as you would think, and that's basically led to them just being another gang. There's also the underworld, and that is, while it is not out in the open as much as it normally or as it could be because of all the corruption, the underworld is a key political group in there. It includes like organized crime, prostitution, drug runners. So they are a very well-known faction that is led by one of the primary antagonists in the series. Then there's independents. These are the people who aren't necessarily part of any specific faction, and they're just working on their own and trying to basically just stay out of the politics. Main protagonist of the story is someone that would fall under the independent status on this, and also some of her contacts also fall under this status. So right now, the history of this is not necessarily as relevant. There's no like major wars or anything going on. The only key thing to bring about in this series is there's just really one main event, but how the books are written is basically every book is two separate stories that are interwoven together. The first is what's happening in the present time with our protagonist, and the second part is always a flashback to previous things that have happened in her life and how they might be relevant or bring about new information or context into the current history. But I would say the key defining event would be the destruction of the Snow family, which is they were very prominent in the politics and in society of Ashland until they were brutally murdered. You have Ira, who is the mother. Then you have three daughters: Annabelle, Genevieve, and Bria. They're an ice elemental family, and there's only one survivor from the main massacre that happened over a decade ago in the series, and that was Genevieve Snow, and she later becomes the main protagonist throughout the series. And this was performed by, the whole massacre was done by Mab Monroe. It's not actually revealed until the end of the first book, but it's pretty obvious. Mab Monroe is a fire elemental. She is the leader of the underworld in the series, so she is the overarching antagonist in the series, and basically a lot of the series is just different building up and various conflicts with both Mab Monroe or her subordinates throughout the criminal empire that is essentially controlling Ashland. Alright, let's talk a little bit about book one. Key places in the book is the city of Ashland. We visit various locations, but the key place that we always come back to is called the Pork Pit. It is a barbecue restaurant in the series that is run by Fletcher Lane. He is the main mentor of our main protagonist, Jen Blanco. Jen Blanco is the essentially pseudonym of Genevieve Snow from the Snow family. She survived what happened because when her family was getting massacred, she is an ice and stone elemental, and her rage basically let loose while seeing her family murdered, and it collapsed the entirety of the house. She managed to survive and escape. Then she was found by Fletcher Lane, who is an assassin, and Fletcher basically took her in as an apprentice and raised her to become an assassin known as the Spider. Fletcher Lane, he was known as the Tin Man, and he was fairly well known for being an assassin who only took specific types of jobs. He had a code of no killing children, and so he's known as more of a moral assassin, and sometimes he would even take jobs for free simply because the person he was helping couldn't afford it. Now, he does get murdered early in book one because what he had been doing for the past 5 or so years is instead of actually completing jobs himself, he acted as essentially the manager for Jen, and he would pass on jobs to her. And so at the start of the book, they talk about a job, essentially the last job that she needs to do, and the person who's hiring her basically betrays her and is trying to cover everything up by killing everyone associated with her. And then we get into almost a John Wick type situation where she then goes out and is basically trying to kill whoever hired her before she gets killed. Now her primary ally in the book is Finnegan Lane. He is the son of Fletcher Lane, essentially the adopted brother of Jen Blanco. Then we have Donovan Kane. He is a tentative ally because he is, in fact, a member of the police, but he's one of the rarities in that he's not actually corrupt. And so he acts as sort of a foil to Jen Blanco, and whereas she sort of clashes with him, and it's often that well, she's more of the ends justify the means, whereas he tries to follow the law to the letter. But because the law and the police force are so corrupt, oftentimes the way that Jin does things has a greater appeal to it, which brings about conflict between them. Next we have the Devereaux sisters, Sophia and Jojo Devereaux. They are a pair of dwarf elementals. And Sophia is actually one of the cooks at the pork pit, and she has worked with Fletcher during doing that, and also helps out if there ever needs to be any sort of body disposed of, because while the police is corrupt, they don't really necessarily want to antagonize them directly. Now, Jojo Devereaux is actually considered upper class in Ashland because she runs a beauty salon and she uses her magic to basically give rich and famous people facials, and that has allowed her a great deal of power within the society. So she is considered upper class, but she is basically the definition of someone who is independent of the general power struggles within the city. So, all right. So, like I said, book one is basically Jen Blanco is hired for a job, but is betrayed by the client, and so the entire first book is about her seeking out the person who hired her, and then killing them before they manage to kill her. So it's a pretty good series. It can be a bit formulaic at times, and if you're not a fan of the whole flashback story within a story, this series might not necessarily be for you, but I still recommend it. And now, oftentimes the flashbacks aren't just like one flashback and then you get back to the story. It always goes from the story to the flashback, back to the story, back to a flashback. So it can seem disjointed at times, but it's still a pretty interesting writing style, and it is an effective way to match the history of the story with the modern day story itself. So still a very good series, and it's fairly long. Like I said, 19 books with additional side stories on top of that. So it's a good read. I recommend it. Next week, I'm going to be doing my series setting breakdown on the Mercedes Thompson series by Patricia Briggs. So stay tuned in.